During the long summer evenings in Colorado, the Hayes family household always seemed to be filled with a blend of warmth and tension. Sarah Hayes had married Robert 2 years ago, after both of them had come out of complicated divorces. Their blended family wasn't perfect, but it was beginning to feel like something real. Sarah was 40, with a quiet strength that came from years of raising her daughter Emily mostly on her own. Robert, now in his mid-40s, was a hardworking man who had spent much of his life managing his family's construction business. He had one nephew who was especially close to him, and because of the complicated dynamics of remarriages and half-siblings, that young man had somehow earned the title of Sarah's step-nephew. His name was Daniel, and he was 24. He had grown up without much guidance after losing his father at a young age, so Robert had stepped in as a father figure whenever possible. Sarah hadn't thought much about him until he began spending more time around the house, especially after he earned his certification as a massage therapist. He was building a clientele and often offered free practice sessions to family members. One evening, when the air outside was thick with the scent of pine and the chirping of crickets, Sarah found herself sitting on the porch with Robert. He was exhausted, his shirt collar still dusted with sawdust from work. He leaned back in his chair, sipped his beer, and sighed. "Daniel came by earlier," Sarah said casually. "He offered to help me with the tension in my shoulders. You know how my back locks up." Robert chuckled. "Well, you should take him up on that. He's trying to build his practice. Besides, you deserve it. You've been holding this house together." Sarah smiled faintly. The truth was, she had already accepted Daniel's offer, and that very afternoon she had let him massage the knots in her back. It had started innocently enough, just his hands pressing firmly into her shoulders, loosening muscles that felt like stone. But as she lay there on the sofa, she realized something unsettling. She wasn't just relaxing, she was noticing him. The guilt crept in quickly. She was married. She loved Robert, didn't she? She told herself it was just a moment of weakness, an appreciation for kindness and touch, nothing more. But the thought lingered long after Daniel left, his easy smile still etched in her mind. The days stretched on, and Daniel began stopping by more often. Sometimes he'd help Robert with projects, other times he'd bring groceries, and sometimes he'd simply sit with Sarah and Emily, laughing at old stories or helping with dinner. Sarah noticed how natural it felt to have him around, how his presence seemed to light up the house. She tried to bury the flickers of emotion that stirred in her, but they had a way of resurfacing at the quietest times. One afternoon, when Robert was away at a business meeting, Daniel came by unexpectedly. Sarah was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing off the garden vegetables she had picked earlier. He walked in with his usual easy stride, carrying a small bag over his shoulder. "I thought maybe you'd need another massage," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes locking onto hers in a way that made her heart skip. She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway where Emily's room was. Her daughter was at a friend's house, and Robert wouldn't be home until late. "Daniel, I don't think that's a good idea," she said softly, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. "It's just to help you relax," he insisted. "You've been stressed lately. You deserve to let go of some of it." She knew she should have said no, should have set boundaries, should have reminded herself of her vows. But instead, she nodded. She told herself it was harmless, that she wouldn't let it go too far. As he worked on her back again, his hands kneading her muscles with practiced precision, Sarah closed her eyes. She wanted to melt into the relief of it, to pretend it was nothing more than therapy. But every time his fingers brushed against her skin, she felt something she couldn't explain. It wasn't just physical. It was the ache of being seen, of being noticed in a way she hadn't felt in years. Afterward, she sat quietly on the sofa, guilt gnawing at her. Daniel stayed for a while, sipping a glass of water, making light conversation. But there was an unspoken current between them now, and Sarah felt it like a dangerous spark. That night, when Robert came home, Sarah tried to act normal. She asked about his meeting, laughed at his jokes, and tucked Emily into bed. But when she lay down beside her husband, she couldn't ignore the heaviness in her chest. She turned on her side, staring at the wall, and wondered how she had let things go so far. Over the next few weeks, The situation became more complicated. Sarah avoided Daniel at first, finding excuses not to be alone with him. But he persisted, always polite, always offering his help, always with that look in his eyes that seemed to say he understood her loneliness. She began to dread and anticipate his visits all at once. One Saturday, Robert suggested they all go on a family outing to the lake. Sarah, Robert, Emily, and Daniel piled into the car, with snacks and towels and a cooler in the back. The day was beautiful, the water glistening under the sun. Emily splashed in the shallows while Robert fished from the dock, and Sarah found herself sitting on a blanket with Daniel nearby. "You seem distant lately," Daniel said quietly, so only she could hear. Sarah's breath caught. "I can't do this, Daniel," she whispered, her voice tight. "I can't keep feeling this way. It's wrong." Daniel looked at her with an expression that was both tender and conflicted. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "But I can't pretend I don't care about you." Her eyes stung with tears. She wanted to deny it, to tell him to leave her alone, to end this before it destroyed everything. But her heart betrayed her. She cared too. That night, back at home, Sarah sat alone in the living room after everyone else had gone to bed. She felt torn between two worlds, the safety of her marriage and the dangerous pull of something forbidden. She thought about Robert, how he worked tirelessly for their family, how he trusted her completely. And then she thought about Daniel, how alive she felt when he was near. The breaking point came a few weeks later. Robert was out of town for a business trip, Emily was at her grandparents' house, and Daniel came over to check in. Sarah tried to resist, tried to tell him it wasn't the right time, but the loneliness overwhelmed her. They sat together on the couch, talking, their conversation drifting closer and closer to the edge of what couldn't be unsaid. "Sarah," Daniel said finally, his voice hushed, "this can't keep happening. Either we stop now or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Sarah's chest tightened. She knew the choice before her, and she knew the cost. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "I can't betray Robert like this," she said, her voice shaking. "I love him. I've made mistakes, but I can't destroy my family." Daniel looked down at his hands, his expression clouded with pain. "Then I'll stay away," he said softly. "For both our sakes." It should have ended there, but life had other plans. A week later, Robert came home early from work and found Sarah sitting alone, tears streaming down her face. He sat beside her, concern etched on his features.